Hello, my name is Tom Francis. This talk was for a GDC session called 2020 Hindsight, where indie devs who'd previously given talks would check back in with what they've learned since. My first time here was 8 years ago. Well, that line made more sense at GDC. This is my lounge. My first time here was not that long ago. But my first time at GDC was 8 years ago, and I was working for PC Gamer, and I hadn't finished making my first game yet. Since then, I finished 4 games, and the advice I've come away with is this. Consider giving up. On a game, on a feature, maybe even on games in general. I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying that you should never rule it out. And in particular, I'm saying this, never give up, is really bad advice, especially for newcomers. We're very quick to romanticize dedication, and we're quick to look at folks who've already released successful games and say, look at them, they didn't give up. Well, I did. I released 4 games. I only managed that because I gave up all the time. I love to give up. It's a huge time saver. If I wasn't so willing to give up at the first sign of adversity, I think I'd still be working on the same game 8 years later. That was a game called Gunpoint, and it turned out that holding people at gunpoint didn't actually lead into any interesting gameplay. If I'd never given up, I'd probably still be trying to find a way to make that work today. Instead, I just left a half-assed version of it in the game, and I focused on a hacking mechanic that turned out to be way more interesting and shipped that. Not all good work has to be grueling. Sometimes if you give up on the hard thing, it helps you find something that's both easier and better. Gunpoint's hacking mechanic was easier to make and better to play with than Gunpoint's gunpoint mechanic. And yes, everyone mocks me now for making games that pretty consistently don't have anything to do with their titles, but I believe it's an affectionate mocking, and the first step towards having an audience that finds you faintly ridiculous is to at least finish something. So that's the virtue of giving up on a feature, but if you really dream big, you can also give up on whole games. Developers don't generally announce the games they give up on, so from the outside it looks like they're finishing everything they start. But behind the scenes, people are giving up on things, and I think it could be helpful to share it. So I'm going to share some games I gave up on. This one is Crushed and Bungled. This was going to be a single-player D&D style adventure where every critical success and failure had a really absurd outcome. So if you roll a 20 when bartering, the shopkeeper just gives you his shop. I knew those outcomes would be a lot of work, but I figured they'd be high value. What I kind of forgot was that the regular success and fail outcomes would also need to be different to everything else, so you're really on the hook to write 4 meaningfully branching paths for every skill check in the game, and fuck that. This one's just called 4X. I was frustrated with the complexity of Civ games, so I thought I'd try making my own. Once I realized this would take real time and work, I discovered I wasn't that frustrated with the complexity of Civ games, and actually that whole genre is fine. In my brief time with that genre, I did explore what I think could be a valuable direction for it to go in future, which is adding rigid body physics to all of your citizens, and then drag selecting them and ordering them all to the same place. So if anyone from Firaxis is watching, I think that's something to consider. This one is called Grappling Hooks and Glass Cutters. It was going to be a heist game where you switch between different team members to break into banks and penthouses and steal stuff. I was making this at the same time as Heat Signature, and this one was the bigger, more ambitious project. Once we actually showed Heat Signature though, people were way more excited about that, so I just thought, great, very happy to give up on this harder project that fewer people want. And giving up on a whole game doesn't have to mean giving up on everything in it. After I'd given up on the grappling hook game, I had an idea for a jam game about using a grappling hook underwater, fighting buoyancy instead of gravity. So I just tried putting a big block of water in my prototype that already had a grappling hook in it, and that felt really cool. So I ended up turning that into a free game called Floating Point, which I put out on Steam. I made that free just because I was feeling guilty about Gunpoint doing well, but if I'd been out of cash, I think I could have sold it for a few bucks, and that would have helped tide me over to the next project. I still get emails from people who paid it for hundreds of hours saying it's what they do to relax. Having a small, finished thing that's out there making people happy is so much more rewarding than a big cursed thing you might never finish. I think giving up is sometimes stigmatized as an act of self-doubt, but I see it as an act of faith in yourself. When you're working on something and showing no signs of working out, giving up on that is saying I trust myself to come up with something better. I trust that this is not the best idea I'll ever have. It's worth asking yourself, how much am I putting into this and how much am I getting back? There are ideas out there that give you something back when you work on them, but you need to explore to find them, and you can't explore if you never give up on the first path you picked. Another false assumption behind the never give up idea is that with enough willpower you will eventually finish. You might not. Money is finite, your energy is finite, you're a human of limited resources. You hear a developer sinking 6 years into a project and then having to end it anyway because they're burned out and broke. I saw someone say they burned out 3 years before they finally stopped working. If you couldn't make your dream game at full capacity, what chance do you have when you're already burned out? So I'm not saying give up, but I am saying don't rule it out. Don't romanticize beating your head against a brick wall. If you must beat your head against a wall, at least beat it against several different walls until you find a cheap and shitty plasterboard wall. And beating your head against it will still hurt, but only for about 6 months, and then your head will smash through and you'll emerge coughing and bleeding and spitting up plasterboard, but you will emerge, rather than just incrementally damaging your skull for 6 years until you can no longer function. Thanks.